You know, I'm not naive about this. I've been in the business 30 years, and a lot of the agents locally call us the deal killers. But we want our buyers to get the best possible place to raise their family, period. And we do whatever we can to get the information. And I understand I'm running into the face of a lot of the common ethic that's utilized out there, but you know, I just want to keep raising the bar. Okay, so let's talk about some problems that tend to drive buyers crazy. And this one is not the best example, but we'll put that out first. The question here, the boot camp question is, well, what's the deficiency? And these are all in your handouts. And it's not as immediately apparent, but if you start looking at this, oh, I forgot to bring my laser pointer. But if you start looking at the left-hand side of the brick wall here, you're going to see that there's some little movement and swelling. When I went up on the roof on this building and hit the parapet wall, which is the masonry wall that goes up above the flat roof, most of the bricks were loose. So we ended up getting a contractor's opinion that was for $55,000. Let's go to the next. Or you want to tell them the deficiency, whatever? Failing masonry wall. Okay. So this is a water heater, and this is a temperature pressure relief valve. And it's a pressure valve that has been capped. It's a safety device. If anybody has a computer or laptop with them or whatever right now, you can go and look up pressure relief valves, safety pressure relief valves. Hot water heaters or water heaters have been known to take out a half of a single family home when they explode, right? They're huge, tremendous amount of pressure, and we're not supposed to have caps over the bottom of the pressure relief valve, especially if they're rusting or deteriorating. It's just a huge safety hazard. Next. Oh, right, capped water heater. So here is a mechanical room where there's a dryer and a water heater. So this has been a problem in the city and with the National Fuel Gas Code for years and years. You're not supposed to have these two pieces of gas equipment in the same room together, right? And the reason why is that when the dryer turns on, it sucks air out of the room. And as it sucks air out of the room, it pulls poisonous gas out of the flue or vent connector that's on top of the water heater. The dryer itself consumes 1,500 cubic feet, if it's 30,000 BTU, 1,500 cubic feet of air per hour to support the flame. If you have an electric dryer, you still can't have it in the same room with the water heater because it pulls the fresh air and the combustion air out of the room, creates negative pressure, so we're pulling poisonous gas back into the living space. Okay, yeah. Great, thanks. Next. Anybody here have any idea what these are, what we're looking at? Except the students?
Termite trails.
There you go. Good, okay. So these are termite tunnels, and looks like it's a very, very deep infestation, way off into the structural components. I've had termites twice in my Old Town building, so I understand. You have to get rid of them. In Chicago, we have something called the subterranean termites. In other places, there's Formosan termites. There's other kind of termites, dry rot termites. Here, our termites live in the soil, and they get moisture every night from the soil. Carpenter ants, on the other hand, will also ruin the wood framing and structural components of your building, but they live in wet wood. They don't live in the ground. So the difference is when you're treating for termites, you have to come up with a treatment that gets rid of them in the soil below your house, and there's multiple ways to do that. If it's a carpenter ant problem, you can find out where the nest is, which is a very difficult thing, and spray boric acid in there or whatever, and then that will kill the queen and the workers. Next. Okay, so deficiency here, John, you know all this stuff, right? You got a building that has all these problems, right?
I didn't buy that one, Sam.
Oh, okay, all right.
Talked me out of it.
Okay, all right.
It's a big crack.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So this is a large structural crack, thanks for laughing, and concrete block. And so how do we know it's structural? Well, I'm not an engineer. I've said that already multiple times. The professional standards for home inspectors you can find anywhere, find on the internet, look up engineering if you want. If those cracks are bigger than 1/4 of an inch in width or differential movement, where one's moving in and one's moving out, then we're supposed to call those significantly deficient, hazardous or unsafe, major problem, and then we say check with your structural engineer to find out how much it's going to cost to fix. And also to find out if the engineer, he or she, also would agree that it's a structural problem. This particular building was in a bar. We do a lot of lease inspections. Sometimes people lease bars and they want a 5-year lease, so they get us in there. This building was built on a sidewalk, so there was no foundation under the building. And as the wet weather came and then the winter came, the sidewalk was lifted and settled down again in the spring. So there's your structural problem. What's the next? Okay, I don't know how well you can see this, but this is a fireplace that currently is being used for gas, but the homeowner had used it for wood. And if you guys know stuff about fireplaces, this is way too tall and way too skinny for wood. If you burn wood in there, the wood smoke that's supposed to collect at the chamber rushes out through the front of the fireplace and fills the house with carbon monoxide. This is not to be used for wood. I can tell you, I don't know, probably 100 times at least, where we do inspections, and on the listing sheet, I should be doing seminars for agents that are doing listing, but on the listing sheet, they call this a wood-burning fireplace because that's what, I don't know, maybe the seller says. I'm not sure why. But this, you can't burn wood in this. This is a coal, originally it was a coal fireplace. You can tell by all the filigree up there that it's an old-time Victorian. Next. So here's another one. Fireplace that has inadequate draft and it's pumping carbon monoxide out into the face of the room, into the room and into the environment. Next. So this is a little bit harder to spot, but if you look at those white knobs up there, they look like thread thimbles. There's wiring running from one knob to the next knob. So this is knob and tube wiring. And thanks, Mike. And this went out of use in the early 1930s. So Marshall Field at the Century of Progress brought at the Columbian exhibition brought electricity into commercial use in 1893. At least that's what the historians that I've read said. And this was the first type or technology of electrical wiring that was used. If any of that wiring, one piece of it, goes into insulation in the ceiling someplace or into a wall that's insulated, then that's a significant fire hazard. This material is oftentimes covered with asbestos cloth, and it is routinely, because it's a copper wire covered with asphalt and cotton, it's very, very brittle because when you use electricity, the wiring gets brittle, right? And over time, like 100 years or 90 years of use, especially in houses that have 3 times the electrical needs as they did in 1910, the wiring is going to be old and brittle. And it's also, under the Home Inspector Licensing Act, archaic technology. So we're going to tell you to get rid of that. Next. And we want you to be aware of it when you're out there buying homes. So this is a dryer exhaust. And I was doing an inspection over here on Armitage in a great big brand new development a few years ago. And we found this on the dryer. Maybe there were 80 units or something. And so I told the buyer that they needed to get rid of that and replace it with a smooth surface 26 gauge sheet metal or something smooth so that the lint would exhaust and the heat would exhaust. So the developer's rep said that that wasn't necessary, that they had checked and the whole building was done that way. And there was an 800 number on the dryer, which I called and asked, and we got through to the manufacturing engineer from the dryer manufacturer, Maytag or whoever it was. And I said, do you guys accept foil spiral vent exhaust flues on your dryer? And they said, absolutely not. It's a fire hazard. So this is a fire hazard everywhere you look, under the National Fuel Gas Code, under the International Residential Code, 2000 and after, 203, 206. This is a fire hazard under the Chicago Building Code, but we don't have enough inspectors that work for the city that are out there looking at these kinds of deficiencies. Next.
Why do they even still sell this stuff?
Yeah, you can buy it anywhere, you know. So this is some concrete block in our industry. We call it CMU, concrete masonry unit, and you can see there's water coming through it. So if there's anybody out here that's bought a split face block home that's gone through that as a problem, not all split face block homes are problems, but Vi Daly, the alderman in this ward, had to write a unique ordinance to deal with it because there are so many homes in the city of Chicago that are full of mold and water and all kinds of problems. And this is an example of what we look for on the outside, collecting water that's working its way through the CMU. And that doesn't mean it's $100,000, but if we find that on all four walls and we start finding mold inside the property, then you've got strike one, strike two, and then we land on that like a ton of bricks. You can use thermal imaging. We have one of those devices, but in the years that we've had it, I haven't used it much because they're not good for primary information. So, in other words, if I took the drywall down and saw that it was wet behind the drywall, I could use my thermal imaging gun to confirm that it was water. But in a courtroom or in a debate, if you're a buyer or a seller, somebody's thermal image doesn't stand up for much because it's a very inexact science, and it is a technology that's not well understood by home inspectors. The last time I checked, there were like 2 people in Cook County that have the certification required to use this, a thermal imaging gun, and they even readily admit their answers are almost always inconclusive. But anyhow, that's a wet wall. Next. Okay, this is kind of an odd slide. Wow. Good thing I didn't serve any wine at this event. We got everybody be spinning here. But those are rafters, and they're meeting at a ridge beam. The ridge beam is the horizontal dark brown piece. And we've got it dark enough in here that I hope you can see that there's a structural gap. There's a structural problem between the rafters and the ridge beam. Why don't those rafters purchase the ridge beam and land on it? They're supposed to. So the ridge beam is actually a little bit, it's not quite tall enough. So it should be, the ridge beam should extend down beyond the heel of the rafter where the rafter first starts. Next.
So the roof is holding up the rafter, not the rafter holding up the roof.
Do you guys get that? The roof is holding up the rafter, not the... Thanks, Sammy. We got to get your opinion on this too. Here's another, this was a hip roof, so it was built like a pyramid. You know, that's a hip roof. A shed roof is just 2 sides. So this is, the big brown board you see there coming off at a diagonal, a technical name is hip ridge board. And you can see all the little blocks and little shims and pieces of stuff that were used to hold this board into place. And when you get 12 inches or 3 feet of snow on your house, you don't want this inadequate structure holding it up. it's not expensive to repair. I mean, not to get me wrong, that doesn't have to be a huge expense to repair, you know. Carpenter, probably less than a day, they could help straighten that all out. Okay, next. Yeah, feel free to jump in, Sam, I appreciate it. This is a building out on Archer Avenue, and I inspected the whole building for the condominium association. And based on what we've gone through with our Wrightwood porch collapse and all the other porches that we've had problems with in the city and across the country, you know, city inspectors today would love to find this because they could fine the people, FINE, and get some money back or whatever, and then he could also force the homeowners association to make this better. Horizontal rails in the city are not approved. Kids climb them and fall over. We don't want horizontal rails. And also those posts and those uprights, I'm not quite sure what that's all about, but I didn't like it. There was, maybe if I had a close-up I could remember on that one, but the horizontal rails are a problem. The stairs were loose and wobbly. You can find it in the Chicago Building Code where it'll say specifically, any gap greater than 1 inch in a wood frame structure is a structural problem. You don't need to be an engineer to figure that out. I get my tape measure, it's bigger than 1 inch, rebuild the structure. Next. But do you see the sag and the ridge beam here? That's the top of the roof. It's maybe not real clear. So there's structural problems. Give me, let's do one more slide. There you go. This is a pretty one. So this is a grease trap. It's also called an interceptor. In Chicago, they call it a catch basin. It's not a catch basin. Those are out next to the curb. And there's toilet paper in there. So that means the main sewer is backing up into the grease components that only the kitchen sink is supposed to be tied into. So we either have, sorry, maybe this, good thing it's after lunch. Yeah. All right, sorry. And anyhow, so it looks like there's a main sewer problem, and the shelf at top of the outflow of the sewer is damaged and gone, and there's grease all over.